I watched episode six, I believe it was, of series two of The Crown yesterday. The episode entitled Marionettes. Now, if you have Netflix and any access to it, do check out The Crown if you've any interest in history. It's a superb series. It really is one of the best I've ever watched. Each episode is gripping. Each episode is very well researched as well. I'm reading a book by Andrew Marr, Diamond Queen, and it's very clear that the Crown has really done their homework. But I want to talk a little bit about this episode because it was a very important one. Only some episodes they put little footnotes at the end for extra information. So this involved Tory peer, Lord Altrincham, um, and basically he wrote an article in his magazine, I think it was called the English Review or the Town and Country English Review. Can't quite remember the exact title. Um, but anyway, in this article, he wrote about the Queen talking to her people like a prickish schoolgirl, as he put it. And this was 1957, so society was still pretty conservative back then, and it caused a furore. Um, Now, what's interesting is the episode showed he was waiting at a dental appointment, and people around him they groaned at this. Let's face it, rather patronizing speech by the Queen about the ordinary people and their mundane lives and so on. And what's interesting is the strength of feeling was such that one character, Philip Burbage, who was a member of the uh, coalition of Empire Loyalists or the Empire Loyalists, forget the exact name they called themselves, but they were a pretty far right group with racial overcurrents wanting to preserve the British Empire. But anyway, he assaulted um, Lord Altrincham as he left the studios with the Robin Day interview in which he addressed this. Um, Now, in the episode, it shows that the Queen herself. It's a great scene. This is just a disclaimer, by the way. If you haven't seen it, stop listening now. A spoiler. In the scene, basically, he thinks he's going to meet the Queen, or excuse me, he thinks he's going to meet her press secretary, and then she herself turns up and basically wants to know what he would have them do. And you can tell there's a frostiness there, but it's still quite something. Now, with the Peerages Act of 1963, Lord Altrincham gave up his peerage and he just became John Grigg. Now, one could argue that he, along with other critics like Michael Muggeridge, played a very critical role in our constitutional history. He wasn't a Republican, he wasn't some sort of revolutionary, he was a monarchist. But he insisted that they needed certain modernization, for example, allowing divorced people to attend palace functions and so on. I think this man was a patriot. I think he performed a great service. And I think that was an example of journalistic courage because he knew it would create a lot of controversy. Um, it's not to say that journalists always get it right, but what's interesting is the palace ended up taking most of his recommendations. Martin Charteris, I think, was somewhat sympathetic to some of his views. This was the Queen's private personal secretary, and of course there was a lot of frowning at what he was saying. But ultimately, most of those recommendations ended up being taken. And the man himself said actually he got quite a lot of public support. I don't know if he was putting on a brave face because there would have been a lot of dissent as well. Like I say, the late 50s was still quite conservative. However, there were starting to be echoes of change at that point. This was the middle of the 20th century. The war was getting further back. It was the post-war generation. Things were changing. In lots of areas, attitudes to homosexuality, attitudes to the death penalty, even things were changing. So I thought it was a very interesting episode, and I would say John Gregg definitely earned his place in history. Um, but there's another thing to be aware of. We have a constitutional monarchy, and even at the time, some did defend his right to freedom of speech. Granted, there was quite a backlash against him, but the point is he wasn't forbidden from writing the article. There was no laws against him writing the article. We had no les majest. This is extremely important to understand in looking at the reign of Queen Elizabeth II. For anyone looking in, anyone that thinks the British worship the Queen, the respect is pretty high, but it is not illegal for us to criticize her, and it happens. I've occasionally criticized Her Majesty, even though I'm a royalist. Times I think she has got the public mood wrong. But what John Grigg was doing was a patriotic act. He was criticizing them in order to help them. It was constructive criticism, I think, in retrospect. And, it's a very interesting episode. But like I say, we don't have les majlis in this country. This is not Thailand. This is not Saudi Arabia or Morocco. Um, the royal family can be criticized, and they often are. But the institution is such a central part of our culture. Anyway, it's a very interesting episode, Marionettes. It's so named, by the way, because at the end, and another spoiler here, the Queen Mother and the Queen are kind of welcoming regular people, so to speak, into the palace, and the Queen Mother is kind of complaining that they have nothing left. They're just marionettes at this point. Um, but anyway, if you haven't seen The Crown, check it out. I'm hooked. I'll be honest, I'm hooked. I watch about 3 episodes a day, and it really, really is well made. Excellent acting, well researched, just very topical. It's not just about stuffy royal etiquette and stuff. There is a lot of gripping storylines in it. It's superb. It really is one of the best shows I've ever seen. So check it out, and that's a little bit of history.